Hey, I just wanted to say real quick before we get into it, we will be installing the LS in our OBS in this video, but for those of you who are new that clicked on it, I just want to set the expectations. We will go over videos like doing the fuel system, the cooling system, air conditioner. Those will probably be standalone. This is more of a like, we've got the stuff all prepped and ready to go, and we get it installed, and we'll see how far that gets. But anyway, I don't want the videos to be more than like 15 or 20 minutes long. So thanks for watching. Here's a fun fact for you. If your fuel tank measures about 48 and a half inches here, it's a 25-gallon tank. If it measures out to 60 inches, you've got yourself a 34-gallon tank. It has been 2 whole days since we dropped that transmission off at Wayne's shop. I'll tell you, there are some vendors or people that can't put a t-shirt in a bag and put it in the mail in the amount of time that Wayne can overhaul a transmission. I've always heard with goods and services that you can pick 2 out of good, fast, and cheap. And as we have established, the transmission was certainly done fast. But according to this invoice, it was not done cheap. Before we load this thing and take it to the car wash, I'm gonna hose it down with this B52 stuff. I found it at the local parts store. You can buy it in a gallon and in this spray. It's what I degreased that engine with, and it worked really, really well. This video is not sponsored by B52, but it could be. I'll tell you right now, a winch with a trailer on it is so freaking clutch. You know what I'm talking about. Man, I'll tell you what, my poor little sandblaster would not touch this goop under this body of this cab. I don't know if the sand that I've got in there is too coarse, or I just don't have the air compressor for it, or exactly what. It did kind of help with some of this sheet metal, like the stamped steel engine mounts. It would cut that stuff off a little bit, but it would eat an entire tank of air trying to get that done. So for the bottom side, since that's like 35 years of like goop built up, just hear me out, undercoating. Yes. All right, I'm going to admit this isn't exactly some of my best work, but I've really enjoyed working on this truck with the intention of it being a driver, and it's going to be mine forever, so I don't have to worry about anyone picking it apart if they're buying it, which normally if I build one to sell, I want to strip it all the way down, do a really good job, and make it super nice. Whereas this one, you know what? It's good enough. Mechanically, it's going to be rock solid, but some of this cosmetic stuff I don't mind so much. I don't want to be scared to put this thing on the highway, drive to Houston, to Lone Star Throwdown, or drive to Nashville for C10 Nationals, or make the trip to Utah for C10 Nationals one year. Wouldn't bother me a bit. Frame prep work is done, at least for the front end and under the cab. We'll deal with this section back here later. So I thought we were ready to get started on the motor mounts, which these, by the way, I bought all this stuff from 918 Motorsports locally. This is the Speed Engineering. That's the part number that these plates bolt to your LS, and then they allow for your small block Chevy mounts to bolt to them. As you can see, like that's the clamshell style, which we have. The problem is I don't see an indentation there in that drawing, and you see this exists in my buckets. So I thought this relief would allow for those to sit in there. They're supposed to mount right there according to the instructions. Should sit about like so. But when it does that, it doesn't rest flush in the recess. Clamshell. These are just factory replacement small block Chevy urethane inserts that look like this. And so yeah, they will sit in here where these used to, which are not in the best potential shape they've ever been in. And then it takes some doing to mash these down together and then bolt them to the frame. In the meantime, we never did put the crank pulley back on our engine after we tore it down and put new gaskets and seals in it and cleaned it up pretty good. You guys remember when we tore the engine down in a video, we cleaned this up and painted it. So I'm gonna put that on. A lot of guys will use or reuse one of their factory crank bolts, which are non-reusable, but I guess it seems like I got a pile of these things in here. Yeah, just pick one. Maybe if you put a little grease right there or something so that rubber won't change the torque, and just run that thing in with one of these old bolts and then buy a new bolt to torque it down properly, because they are one-time use torque to yield bolts unless you buy an ARP. But again, 918 Motorsports, I think this was $12 or $14 or something like that. Back when the LS motor was kind of new though, we couldn't find these installers that worked with this engine, but since they've been around so long now, it's not uncommon to find tool rentals available and use the right item for this. So your local parts store probably will have something you can loan, or you can order one on Amazon because they're just not that expensive. Something you'll need that you won't find on Amazon is this little homemade jobby that my homeboy Doug made. And basically it's a piece of flex plate and some tubing, so you can bolt it right up against your flex plate and tighten it down. It'll keep keep the engine from turning when you're tightening that crank pulley. Don't use an impact for this, kids. Now we've got the pulley all the way flush against, I guess it'd be the oil pump in there. Yeah. This is our new bolt. GM part number this. Again, you can use an ARP bolt if you like. To torque that thing, you're gonna need a torque wrench that's good up to 250 pounds. It's also helpful if you're strong as an acre of garlic, so you can get it there. This is a rare bird on these type of upper mounts, so should have a tool somewhere in here that can alleviate this problem. All right, we're waiting for the paint to dry on those recently modified upper mounts, or cups, as some like to call them. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this adapter plate, and I like to use a little bit of thread locker. This is orange, which is supposed to be somewhere between blue and red. The blue probably be good use for this, but I can't imagine when these are going to need to come off. Instructions don't really list it, but based on some of the things I've seen from like ICT Billet, it looks like the factory location is all the way forward on these mounts. So that's where we're going to put ours. Our recently modified ones, that is. And I put blue thread locker on these. Is it being aluminum? I don't want to get aggressive. And just our luck, this bolt is bottoming out on the engine block before this cup gets tight against our engine mount. Like, has nobody ever tested this kit? The issue for the passenger side is that little bung on the block for where the AC compressor mounts is making contact with our bucket here before it gets flush. So more cutting and modifying. After using washers on both upper rear bolts, both sides, to space it out, modifying our lower engine mount cups to get rid of that hump in them, and trimming this AC gusset on the block to clear these engine mounts, these pretty much just bolt right on. If there's a worst engineering design in history, I think this would be a contender that General Motors has accomplished here. The bolts go through this, the mounts into this factory K-member, which outside of holes like this size and that one down below, you don't have access to the nuts on the backside of these bolts unless you disassemble the suspension and pull the coil and the shock out and then reach into a smaller opening to get to them. So yeah, you got to use the buddy system on this one. We finally reached the stage where we can pull the OBS in the main garage and start doing some of the serious technical work. Let's go over a couple of the parts that we're going to need. This is from Speed Engineering, bought through 918 Motorsports, from their suspension division, which they conveniently call Suspension Engineering. And it is their OBS transmission crossmember, and it is designed to work with their exhaust, which we have as well. Their X-pipe for these comes with this hardware. Oh, here's the part numbers. So top part number is the shims and the bottom part number is the crossmember. So I think you can get this in red or black. Their website states that you're going to need 3 of these shims to get the transmission lined up for their exhaust system, if not mistaken. And this is the hardware they send to mount the cross member in the frame. We've got the engine ready with the hoist. The transmission, of course, is sitting here as well. We got a couple little things we need to do to that. This is the torque converter we're going with on this build. It's from Performance Torque Converters. I guess these guys, a couple of them used to work for TCI or something like that. I called them up, told them what the truck weighed, the cam specs, what we were trying to accomplish with this build, and they built this in like 2 or 3 days and shipped it out to us. There's our instructions about putting fluid in it and test fitting everything, and then here's a little statement about how your torque converter should be 1/8 to 3/16 from away from the pump, which is this direction. So you add shims between the flex plate and the torque converter to accomplish that distance, which we've done before on the channel, and we'll look into that when we go to mount this thing. I guess some flywheels it wouldn't be a flywheel, I guess, with the torque converter, but some flex plates must have smaller holes. Send it pretty nicely packaged, and actually send it with torque converter bolts. Well, 2 of them anyway. Oh, yep, there's the 3rd. A lot of the manufacturers will sell you those bolts separately, and at the price of this torque converter, I was extremely, extremely happy. I don't think they gave me any kind of special deal, but it's like $300 or so plus shipping. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a lockup. 2200 to 2500 stall, I think would be just right for our application. When you're doing these projects by yourself, you want to make sure you have your hardware ready. Here's our engine mount bolts. These are the bolts that came with this transmission mount. This is also from Speed Engineering or Suspension Engineering. It depends on which website they're calling themselves that they sell that. Comes with these washers and split lock washers, and the bolts that will go, they go in here through the transmission cross member and through however many shims, which I don't think that's going to be long enough to go through all those shims. We'll see what happens. I've got this set out and ready. This is our TV cable. So this is what tells the transmission kind of when to shift based on throttle position. It's easier to go ahead and get that threaded into that little wire and bolted down out here before we have it inside the truck. I'll probably leave out the dipstick tube for now because those things tend to get in the way when you're fighting your way into the motor, into the truck. These are our transmission cooler lines, what we typically get from Amazon or ICT Billet or 918 Motorsports, are O-ring fittings that, oops, wrong drawer, adapt to 6 a.m. Yeah, here we go. I knew I had a bunch of them. There's the part number from ICT Billet. Again, there's multiple sources you can get these from, and that will thread in to 4L60, 4L60E, and 700R4, and probably 200R4. These are not metric, by the way. 11/16. But these are 19 millimeter. You don't need these things to be tightened like lug nuts. It's O-ringed, so you really just need to run it in there until you compress the O-ring. And you'll notice there's a bevel there that O-ring will kind of sit in. Here's your pro tip for this video. It goes for actually all the hardware. As you saw, we kind of had it ready. Have your hardware laid out and ready where you're gonna need it, especially when you're doing it by yourself. It'll save you a bunch of crawling in and out. When you're doing an LS swap and you're reusing one of the older style transmissions that did not come behind an LS generation engine, you have to have a specific flex plate like this one is, and this little spacer tube. I think it has to do with like the distance of the bell housing that you're trying to make up here. You want to make sure this is cleaned up. According to the instruction from PTC, this is also in there. This is cleaned up, a little bit of grease or something on it, and then check on your torque converter that there's not like excessive paint or something you need to clean off, because it needs to sit in that spacer bushing, and you should be able to slide it flush up against the flex plate. So when you're test fitting to get your distance right off of the transmission pump, you don't want that to be when you find out you got a lot of trouble. Put about a quart of transmission fluid, or however much you can get, in your torque converter and slide it on the transmission. You can really take your time doing this. These things take that transmission fluid really slowly. And then sometimes you can like turn them up. You can sort of see it start taking it in there a little easier. Then let it rest and kind of keep an eye on it. Come back later and add a little bit more. All right, I put a little transmission fluid on everything. They say you can put grease on this too, but whatever, dude. I'm gonna be real careful and support the weight of your torque converter so it's not resting against like that O-ring seal till it gets up on some threads. Oh, somehow we still managed to pour a little bit out. It's time to do the maths. So we have our calipers and we've got them set at fractions of an inch. And almost all calipers, if you open them this way, that comes out of the bottom, which is another method of measuring. So I will put the calipers against the flex plate here, and then I will extend the tab out until it makes contact with that surface of the mounting tab. So got that touching that surface, and this touching the surface of the flex plate. And it tells me that we have 3/8 of an inch whenever the torque converter is all the way against the face of the transmission pump. Now we're looking for an 1/8 to 3/16. This needs to move out at least an 1/8, and that will give us the maximum amount of space from the pump, but the minimum amount of washers that we've got taking up thread on our torque converter bolts. Makes sense on the instructions now why they want you to put this small tab towards the top and the big one towards the bottom. I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, so the idea is this will rest on these tabs and the bolt will slide in real easy. Oh, got something. This transmission cross member, there's no instructions. I saw pictures on their website under their exhaust system, not under the cross member, and noticed it. Of course, the arches go up, but this one makes contact with the pan before it gets far enough forward to bolt this, to run bolts in the mount. And when you flip these way off center to where this bolt could probably line up here. I don't love the idea that only one bolt will be in that transmission to the cross member, but in all actuality, that's all that was on these from the factory. These are the 1 7/8" stainless headers from Speed Engineering. Get a couple of these bolts ready. I'm just gonna test fit these headers on here without gaskets for now. And bring any bolts with me. I take the air conditioner off and fit it in there. But it looks like probably end up having to cut that tab off the side of the transmission. This would have been way easier to cut off of that transmission while I had it out here on the floor. Stay there, buddy. Looks like the transmission's gonna have to come down in the back, maybe for this to flush up just right. Man, it is a tight fit, which they did state that on the website. So it's gapped at the top, which means the bottom needs to swing out, but it's making contact right here with this upper control arm mount. I'm not sure going down is going to help much. I certainly don't like how close this brake line is. I'm going to have to massage that thing a little bit. There's no way these would have went in without trimming this transmission right here, because I took a full, I don't know, inch off of it for that ear. Header is still, well, it wouldn't be touching the block if we could get it to swing out this way like it needs to still. Here's what we ended up with for now. I've got 2 shims, and I ran the bolt in the middle hole of the mount and 1 hole to the right here. So technically the bolt's going right there. That should be fine. These look like we've got pretty good clearance coming back. I could see where it could stand to go maybe up 1 more shim based on the angle of these exhausts, but I still have that concern with this upper A-arm mount. If it raises up some, I don't guess it'll make a huge effect on this contact point. It's kind of hard to tell with the lighting and such. If it still makes contact, and raising it up is not gonna help that at all. Lowering it a bunch might help, but then we're right on the, lowering it's not really an option. So more than likely we'll end up putting a little dent in this header, which is unfortunate because it's specific for this application. You know, maybe it sits a little wonky on the mounts, you know, I could use, but really you need like a 1/4 inch in between there. Anyway, this is probably gonna do it for this video. I don't wanna just become any more frustrated about details like that. The engine and transmission are in. We will work on the rest of it in the next video. Probably put that X pipe on it and do the fuel system because we've got all new stuff there. Well, except the stock lines here. Anyway, you'll see it in the next video. We'll get it plumbed up and get this sucker running.